What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? And happy New Year. That's right, 2018 rolling in one more year on the right side of the ground. And if you're listening to this for the first time, thank you for joining You're the Vet. I am so grateful that you're giving me the opportunity to entertain you with some of the guests that come on here. If you're a returning guest, welcome back. Man, I'm just so super honored to be able to continue to host this platform for the men and women that are listening to this and have the opportunity to speak to amazing, phenomenal guests like the guest that you're going to hear today, Major Scott A. Huesing, the author of Echo in Ramadi, and we'll get into that in a bit. Right before we get into business, I just want to mention that You're the Vet is on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I know that I've been MIA for a little bit. Keep in mind, I am a master's student, so I had to take a hiatus and focus on school and family at the same time. But we're back and we are alive and kicking. I did not go anywhere. So if you've missed me, I'm sorry. Thanks to everybody who's reached out to me and has shown some type of worry or compassion. And I'm back. So let's kick off 2018 even stronger than 2017. And we're going to do that with the very first person on this show this year, which is Major Scott A. Huesing. Like I said earlier, Scott has written a book called Echo in Ramadi, which pays homage to the individuals that he served with during that battle, the family members that are able to tell the story of the individuals who came home and did not come home. And you know, there's 75 different stories that are wrapped up into one book, and I'm looking forward to it. The book drops on February 20th of 2018, but right now you can pre-order on Amazon. You can also go to www.echoinramadi.com, and you can look for it there. Scott is a 24-year Marine Corps veteran. He stepped on the footprints in 1989 when I was a shy 7 years old. And, you know, he just went through his career trying to become the best leader possible. After spending a little time on the enlisted side and learning about the leader he did and did not want to become, he decided to go back to school and serve in the reserves and finished college in 3 years, where he states that he was able to because he treats every challenge in life as a mission. And taking that back into the Marine Corps as a commissioned officer, Scott's sought out training and he's been battle tested. And in 2006, Scott had the privilege to command the Marines of Echo Company, Second Battalion, and they had the honor to follow such a great leader. Because one thing that you'll hear from this conversation is that Scott is genuine. He cares, he's compassionate, and he enjoys being a leader, and not in the mindset of I lead because people have to listen to me, but instead I lead because I like to serve. And it's just in the cards. Scott said that being enlisted didn't make him a better officer. It just gave him better perspective. And that perspective being he wanted to be with the Marines. He wanted to be with them on the menial task. He wanted to be with them in the firefights. And right now he's with them as a support service, and he's telling their stories in a book where he could have easily told his own story. You can find this online, but I wanted to share it here since I have your attention. And this is the synopsis of Echo in Ramadi. For several brutal months, from winter of 2006 through the spring of 2007, 250 Marines from Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marine Regiment fought daily in the dangerous, dense streets of Ramadi, Iraq during the multinational forces surge ordered by President George W. Bush. The Marines' mission? To kill or capture anti-Iraqi forces. Their experience? Like being in hell. Now Major Scott A. Huesing, the commander who led Echo Company through Ramadi, takes readers back to the streets of Ramadi in a visceral, gripping portrayal of modern urban combat. Bound together by brotherhood, honor, and the horror they faced, Echo's Marines battle day to day on the front line of a totally different kind of war, without rules, built on chaos. In Echo and Ramadi, Huesing brings these resilient, resolute young men to life and shows how the savagery of urban combat left indelible scars on their bodies, psyches, and souls. Like war classics We Were Soldiers, The Yellow Birds, and Generation Kill, Echo and Ramadi is an unforgettable capsule of one company's experience of war that will leave readers stunned. Wow. And besides knowing what the book's about, I am no more privy to any of the stories inside that book than you are. So I am super looking forward to reading Echo and Ramadi, and hopefully you guys go out there and order your copies. Scott and I also talk about what it means to be a leader. We talk about the transition process of opening your own business and giving it your all. We talk about some of the similar stuff that you hear from other guests, such as networking and utilizing the services around you to get back on your feet or find your lane in the civilian side of life. Scott brings up some of the programs that have not been talked about on this show yet, such as the Veterans Writing Program, which is something that I know about personally, and I'm glad he brings it up because it's just one more resource out there for you to have, and I highly recommend looking into it. One last thing that Scott and I talk about is the nonprofit Save the Brave, a 501c that he is heavily involved in that helps veterans that are going through PTSD or transition woes or finding themselves woes, and giving them a platform to, connect with other veterans or connect with groups that can help them. And all proceeds go right back to the veterans that they're aiding. So between Scott's pre-service, his military service, his time in Ramadi that led to this book, getting out and starting his own consulting business, speaking engagements, Save the Brave. I mean, Scott is out there doing big things to help the individuals that have given any time to their country. I am honored to have Scott have joined the Year of the Vet family. And hopefully if this is a conversation that tugs at you and you want to reach out to Scott, by all means, visit the show notes and connect with Scott and figure out how you can help each other. So with that being said, let's move right into this conversation with Major Scott Huesing. Scott, I'm honored to have you on the show today, especially as the very first interviewee of 2018. So, man, I'm just excited that you agreed to be a part of the Year of the Vet family. So thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be on the program, Robert. And like I said, I love the messages you guys send out to all of our veterans. So happy to be here.
Thanks. Happy New Year to you. So the format is I just want to kind of get a feel of who you are prior to the service and then, how life has changed for you. So who was pre-Marine Corps Scott?
Well, I grew up in Illinois. My mom raised me, mother after my parents divorced when I was very young. And then I moved up to the Chicago area, went to high school, and got in my fair share of trouble. Didn't have a great high school career, to say the least. So I didn't have a lot of supervision. But once I was introduced to the Marine Corps through a friend of mine, I felt that it was really a natural fit for me and probably filled in a lot of those gaps insofar as, discipline and regimented lifestyle that I was probably in need of as a young kid, instead of being left to my own devices and getting into more than my share of trouble.
Yeah.
So it worked out. It was a great fit for me. And I understand it's not for everybody. And it's a choice that I made at a really young age. I just turned 19 when I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And despite having served over 24 years, I always say this too, because the question was, who was pre-Marine Corps Scott? The Marine Corps is a big part of who I am, but I never really let it define me as a person.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful what it gave me as far as the discipline but also the extended family that I've now come to enjoy and continue to through my writing and my public speaking. It's been a real journey for me, and that's kind of part of my story that I love to share. But before joining the Marine Corps, I was, that's a difficult question, I think, to answer. I never really did any self-reflection as a young teenage kid, and was thrust into the Marine Corps. I just turned 19 years old.
And I think a lot of people that leave the Marine Corps, whether it was, terminal lance or, 24 in, I think a lot of people can say that the Marine Corps helped shape that for the future. But one of the reasons I ask is because your leadership resume is phenomenal, right? So from what I've read and from what you've published out there, I feel it's something that you can't teach. And what I've noticed a lot is a lot of the individuals that are natural leaders in the service have, I don't want to say a troubled background, but they've had to overcome a lot of adversity to get where they're at. So, like, you said that you had a brother, or is it a few siblings?
Yeah, one older brother.
One older brother. So, at what age did your parents divorce?
Probably first grade.
Yeah. So you had to learn from a young age how to be like self-sufficient because mom was out putting food on the table.
Well, I wouldn't say self-sufficient. I mean, my mom and dad both worked, and my dad was always there for me.
Gotcha.
Growing up.
So mom and dad were around, and I mean, you had a little bit of structure. Did you play sports while you were growing up?
Yeah, I was active in sports. I liked the football, and I, was a big swimmer. Always been very love the outdoors, and I think again that's a natural fit for guys that join the military. So despite any, people that come from some sort of non-nuclear family, which you're right, I think that's a common trend that I found when I was both enlisted as an officer in counseling Marines and just talking to guys in general, and this isn't exclusive to the Marine Corps, that there's a large segment of the military population that come from some sort of non-nuclear family. It could be divorce, it could be dysfunctional family, it could be, whatever the case may be. But I think that the military gives you that. It really gives you a sense of brotherhood and camaraderie and that family that is really unique to, especially the Marine Corps, that puts a heavy emphasis on the brotherhood and tradition and histories. But it's, I think, typical of the military in general, and a lot of young men and women gravitate towards that because of some of those voids in their life, growing up. So it's really been interesting. But there's also plenty of people in the military that come from traditional families, and they succeed, and they're just as good a leader as anyone else that comes from any type of diverse background or whatever the case may be, or non-nuclear family.
Yeah.
So, it's not any better or any worse, I think, as far as leadership development goes.
Now, at 19, you enlisted. So leading up to that time, did you know that the Marine Corps was your answer, or was there another option and you kind of found yourself?
No, I knew nothing about the Marine Corps other than what I'd seen in movies and on television, and all of the glamorized, romanticized aspects of the military. I really didn't know anything about it. And again, having led a pretty high risk lifestyle growing up, just getting in fights, getting in trouble, racing a motorcycle when I was in high school. The Marines seemed like a natural fit. They're the biggest group of risk takers I'd ever been introduced to.
Yeah. And
I just saw them in these awesome dress blue uniforms and knew nothing about what they were all about. And once I enlisted and went to boot camp, I was, thrust into that environment, but I embraced it, and, was in a leadership position, even in recruit training as the platoon guide. And, just to step up to those levels of responsibility, I think it was a natural fit for me.
Yeah.
So after I enlisted, and, I served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but then also realized the value of an education through examples that I had had in the Marine Corps, some good, some bad, and then made the decision to go to college in Illinois State. So I left active duty and was in the reserves as a machine gunner in Chicago area while I went to college, getting my degree. And then I was fortunate to graduate in 3 years. And I tell that because of the fact that I attribute my college success and being able to get my degree in 3 years to what the Marine Corps gave me as far as discipline and treating every challenge in life as a mission. And that's one of the great things that you get from it. So you really are able to apply all those tools that they teach you throughout life. So yeah, you get this because, whether you do 4 years or 24 years, your service matters. And I tell that to every veteran, and I thank every veteran that has served. And I never want anyone to diminish their service because there's such a small percentage of the American population to begin with that their service matters. And I think that's an important message that everyone hears is whether you were on the front lines in combat or whether you served in peacetime or whether you did a tour in Germany, you served, and you should be justifiably proud of everything you did while you served your country, because not everyone can do that. Not everyone can join the Marine Corps. Not everyone can join the Army or any other service branch. It's just something that people have a calling for, and they are people that want to help other people and provide a service. And they're a rare segment of the American population that are essentially protectors. And I think that's something people either learn throughout their lives or something innate in them that make them want to help others. It's really something I found when doing interviews with veterans and writing about veterans and those that have served, that there's all these connecting points that is common to people who have served in the military. They may not have wanted to join the military growing up, but there was something they wanted to do to serve other people, but ultimately they wound up join in the military or the Marine Corps. It's really been kind of a fascinating revelation that I've stumbled upon in just doing interviews with people, and not only my first book, Echo and Ramadi, but other work I'm involved with.
Well, I'm interested in, you've said the word serve like 48 times, and the thought behind it, because it's something that resonates with me. We talked yesterday before the conversation today, and I mentioned something to you where I knew that I was kind of stuck in contracting world, but I wanted to be of service. What does it mean to you to serve or to be of service?
Well, I think it's essentially what the spirit of military service is, and what the Marines do is helping those that can't help themselves.
Yeah.
And that's, again, something that is a calling, and it's something that people take on willingly. And it's a real sacrifice, because whatever is portrayed in mainstream media, or you listen to on the radio, or you read in the newspapers, it's never that easy to describe on what it means to serve your country. The hours you spend away from your family, the hours you spend training for missions that are unknown, that lay just on the horizon, the guys that have done multiple combat tours, the friction and the pressure that puts on people, not only physiologically but emotionally, and the pressure it puts on their families. It's really hard to capture what it means to serve. And I think it varies for each service member, what reason they join the Marine Corps for, or the military. Some do it out of tradition, some do it out of service to country, but whatever the reason is, they have a calling and a willingness to help other people that can't help themselves. It's really the true spirit of what Marines do.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was in me all along, and it wasn't until I was introduced to that culture it became apparent to me.
Let me ask one question, because you enlisted in 89?
Yeah, I enlisted actually in December of 1988 on the delayed entry program. So I had a couple months, and then went to boot camp in April of 1989.
So you did some time, and then you said that there were individuals that kind of showed you what not to do and how to approach education. Can you kind of dabble in that a little bit?
Yeah. So throughout any military career, or throughout life for that matter, Robert, there's always examples of what to do and also great examples of what not to do. And I think that those lessons are equally as valuable if you're a student of your trade or your profession, that you not only observe the good things, but the bad things. And I think that was one of the real lessons that I learned as I progressed throughout my career as both enlisted and as an officer, is I never wanted to do certain things as I led Marines that I was privileged to lead, based off of some observations that were, poor examples of leadership. And I think overall the military in general does a tremendous job and has tremendous schools for their leaders. They give them the best training and the best education, and they screen everybody, both enlisted and officers, and only allow those with the best records to command and ultimately be responsible for the lives of those young men and women that enlist to serve in our nation's military. So yeah, I had some examples of what wrong looked like, but as a guy that's seen both sides, both enlisted and officer, I always say this, is that being enlisted didn't make me a better officer. It just gave me some better perspective on what was important to the young Marines. It gave me some perspective on how valuable their time was. And I never wanted to be that guy, an example of bad leadership. So it was paramount to me to always lead from the front. And I always thought my place was with the Marines. And I never subscribed to the adage that, officers need to know their place, thinking that officers, especially within the infantry community, should be seen, doing menial tasks that only the enlisted Marines would do. I always thought my place was with the Marines. And I like to think that they embrace that, because if there was, gear to move, I was there moving it with them. If there was, a patrol, I was on it. If there was a firefight, I was in it. I always wanted to be there at that point of friction with my Marines, so they understood that I was always willing to do what I was asking them to do. And I think that's an important tool of leadership. And it's not anything that I came up with. That is something that the majority of all leaders in the Marine Corps especially subscribe to, is lead from the front. It's not just a bumper sticker or something that you see on a poster. It's really something that most Marine leaders take to heart and really apply on a daily basis.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into like the meat and potatoes of what you're doing today. You went through the process of enlisting and you lived that life, and then you saw that you wanted to do something bigger and better and lead at a different level. So you got out, you went reservist, you finished your degree in 3 years, and then you came back and you were your first platoon commander in 99. Now, your story today revolves around the Second Battle of Ramadi. Up until that point, what was your career like?
Well, I had a traditional career. When I got my commission in the Marine Corps, I served with, various infantry units. I did a tour with the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team Company, and then went to my career level school as a captain before receiving orders to 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, and taking command of Echo Company, which is what the story is based on. I sometimes get asked the question, why was that story so important to write about Echo and Ramadi? And I think there are points in your career that are absolutely highlights. But I think that I had a similar career to what other officers have. But at that point in time, during the Second Battle of Ramadi in 2006 and 2007, it was really a significant battle. And the stories and the interviews that I got from the over 75 Marines and soldiers and families I interviewed for writing the book, Echo and Ramadi, was important to me. So that's something that I wrote to honor the sacrifices And ultimately, that book will, serve as a portal for healing for some of the Marines and some of the families that were struggling with the events that they dealt with during that deployment. So, I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but
no, it kind of does. And I think the thought process behind the question was, you describe Ramadi as an experience in hell. It's my feeling that we're all put into places for reasons, right? And so, like, you were the person that needed to be there for the people who got home to get home. Again, back to your leadership qualities. Like, I can hear in your voice that I would follow you into Ramadi. And I was in the air wing. You know what I mean? Like, I can hear the qualities of leadership that I can see why people trusted you with their lives. And so what I guess I was wondering is, why you?
I was very privileged to have the opportunity to lead some of the best men and women at times in combat. And that's a real privilege. And I really look back on that and feel very fortunate that I was afforded that opportunity. It was an extreme privilege that very few enjoy. And the great thing about that group of Marines was, again, I don't ever like to boast that, Echo Company was the biggest badass company of Marines that ever walked the face of the battlefield. They weren't. There were plenty of other units, plenty of other Marines that suffered more, that endured more loss, and that fought just as heavily as we did when we were in Ramadi. But I was also very fortunate to have a large group of young enlisted Marines that had served in 2004 in the first Battle of Ramadi, and they brought that life experience and that combat experience to the company. So we may not have been an elite unit by definition, but we had this remarkable chemistry within that company that allowed us to succeed on the battlefield day in, day out, oftentimes fighting 2, 3, 4 times a day in direct contact with insurgent forces in Ramadi. And our success is directly attributed to those young Marines and sailors that we fought with, and the Army, because we worked directly for 1st Brigade Combat Team, the Ready First, and Task Force 19 Infantry and 177 Armor. We bounced around Ramadi, and I was very fortunate to work for some fine commanders in the Army that employed our skills and capabilities to really make a difference in a pocket of resistance in Al-Anbar province in 2006. So our success, again, I always attribute to the young Marines and sailors that I trained with and ultimately deployed with during that point of friction on the battlefield. So to say that I was hand selected or is
no, I got
never
that.
categorized myself as someone that was hand selected to do it. I think that I was very fortunate to have been able to command, those Marines and sailors and be as successful as we were based off of their sacrifices.
Yeah. So Echo and Ramadi is your book. And did I hear 75? You interviewed 75 different individuals?
Correct. Yeah, I conducted the book Echo and Ramadi is nonfiction. So I conducted over the year it took me to write it over 75 interviews with the Marines, with the soldiers of Task Force 19 Infantry and 177 Armor, Steel Tigers, and the families and Gold Star brothers and mothers and dads, and everybody that was involved played a real part in helping me share this story.
So what was your experience of writing that book like compared to what you thought it was going to be? Because that's not only did you live through it, and you've experienced the hardships that come from it personally, but you had to go through 75 different stories of what you did not experience and what somebody else experienced. So what was that like for you?
It was a great experience, Robert, to see those guys and talk to them. And what was great about it was it'd been almost 10 years since we fought. And yet we, largely through social media and phone calls and some reunions and oftentimes some tragedies that, befell our company from Marines that we've lost to the effects of post-traumatic stress and suicide. And those are part of the book too. I can't just talk about the firefights and the friction and the explosion. There's also some, grim aspects of what we suffered after the war, but there's also some great stuff too, and the levity of it all under some of the worst conditions. And to be able to go back through that, I think that time had passed where the Marines and the families had had time to process and were really able to share those stories with me. I think it was the right time to tell the story, and people had had time to heal and process. So it was really fascinating as I went in the interview process and was doing research and making sure all the facts were correct. And as I got through the final compilation of all the chapters and putting that big ham sandwich together as a manuscript, it was really fascinating because some of the stories that were shared, readers will pick up this book and they'll think, oh, it's nothing like that in the movies. And then there's other things that they'll realize you think that only happens in the movies, but in actuality, it really did happen in real life. Some of the stories that were told to me, and I don't want to give away any of those stories because they're so interesting to read. And those only came through after weeks and months of laborious interviews and exciting interviews, and sometimes very heartfelt and emotional interviews with the Marines and families that shared their stories with me. I'm just so grateful to everyone that contributed to the book. And if any of them are listening to this program, I want to say thank you again to all of my friends, family, fellow warriors, and especially my Gold Star families that really gave of themselves and were able to share their stories. It was a fascinating process. Writing a book is a huge endeavor, and having finished this project, there's not a single time that I go into Barnes and Noble or a public library and don't look around and think, man, I may not want to read all the stuff on the shelves here, but I know that everybody that has a book sitting on the shelf has put a lot of time and effort into getting it published because it's a significant emotional event, to say the least. And throughout that process, I was also extremely fortunate to not only have the support of my Marines to validate the story and say, yes, sir, this story is spot on. You did a great job. Because that's one of the great things, too, about the Marine Corps, as you know, is we don't really play by the corporate business rules. And if something in the story wasn't right, they would have called me on it and told me to hit the brakes and rewrite some of it. And that was very validating to me to have their endorsements and support that I got the story right. And Echo and Ramadi is their story. It's not just my story. It's really their story. And it's emblematic of not just those individual actions on the battlefield, Robert, but also what all Marines and soldiers experienced during that time. I think is what's most important, is that every reader, whether they served in the military or not, will have an understanding of those type of conditions under very stressful, high pressure, kinetic combat action that is only known to a very select few. But the book is also written in a way where it's very accessible to every reader. It's not rife with military jargon in terms of people don't understand. Although it's nonfiction, it really reads like a novel because it's a story, and that's what I want to tell, is their story. Yeah. And it's about people, and it's about feeling, and it's about the emotion, not so much about things or events or nondescript events. What was important to me when I wrote the story was to let the readers understand the emotion and the feeling of what the Marines and what the families had gone through during a very impactful time in their lives. Yeah. So writing Echo and Ramadi was an amazing experience for me. And I'm so very excited to tell this story. And as we near closer to February 20th, when the book hits the bookshelves everywhere, I continue to get support. Our latest endorsement came from a pretty famous Marine, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who just read the book and put an endorsement on it. But I've had so much great support from not only Marines and Second Battalion, 4th Marines, like Major General James Livingston, who's a Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. He wrote the foreword to my book, Echo and Ramadi, but was also an Echo Company commander in Vietnam during the historic Battle of Dido in 1968. He wrote an amazing foreword to the book and has supported me. Bing West, who's a New York Times bestselling author, Jack Coughlin, who's a friend of mine, New York Times bestselling author, Dale Dye, actor and highly decorated Vietnam veteran. All of these people have come together to support this book. And those endorsements are great and mean a lot to me, but the most important ones to me are also the ones from people like Chris Libby, who's one of my Gold Star brothers, and his mom, Jenny Libby, who's a Gold Star mom of one of the squad leaders, Corporal Dustin Libby, that we lost on a grueling firefight in December of 2006. To have their support and endorsement that I got their story right is really the most important thing to me at the end of the day.
Now, there's other individuals out there that have stories that they want to get out. So for individuals who do have stories, because writing is a healing process, whether you publish it or not, right? Writing can heal, and that's why people talk about gratitude journals or journaling in general. What is something that you pulled from this process that you could pass on to somebody who's in that process of, man, should I put something on paper? How do I do it? And
no, that's a great question. And something I've been asked a couple of times. My advice to them is do it. There's a time for talking and there's a time for doing, and books don't write themselves. And I also say this, Robert, is that there's so many great stories out there. So many veterans have amazing stories, and not all of them are stories of firefights and explosions and heartache. Some of them are really great stories of success and transition. So whatever your story is, don't be afraid to tell it. Write about what you know, write about what you've done, and tell your story if that's what you are passionate about. Really tell your story. And I also say this, is that not everything's a book. Everyone's like, oh, I have to write 300 pages and, get published and do this. And I say, well, write an article about it. Maybe it's an expose. Maybe it's a blog site. Maybe it's an online social media journal, and you engage your peers and fellow veterans. So not everything's a book. My story just fit that way, and it's just the way I envisioned it and ultimately crafted it. But I think it's important for listeners to understand that if they have a story, they should tell it. And they should go through the process and obviously educate themselves on how to do it the right way. And there's so many great resources. But the best resources are your fellow veterans and friends that you can reach out to within your network. Yeah. And just, even go online and, type in how to write a book or how to write an article. There's so many references and so many resources these days online that you really have a multitude of platforms to share your story. Mm-hmm. And I think all of them are valuable. I've been very fortunate to be involved with the Veterans Writing Project with Writers Guild of America West up in LA for the past 8 months. It's a year-long project. And if there's listeners interested, they can just go to the Veterans Writing Program with WGA, and they can submit some of their work. And it's an amazing program. And these are legitimate Hollywood screenwriters and actors and novelists that have given their time to help veterans out. And the majority of them have either been in the service or affiliated with veterans or had family members that serve. And they give freely of their time every week and every month to help this group of 50 to 60 veteran writers hone their craft. So there's really so many opportunities for people to get their stories told. And I would just say, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best advice.
Again, going back to the original question was, writing the book, was it a healing process for me? I don't think I had some massive catharsis in, putting the words on the paper and making that happen, because my objective was to not only tell my story, but also tell the story of the Marines, as, again, the book ultimately serving as just one more portal for guys to heal. I think my real success in transitioning after 24 years in the Marine Corps and working in the private sector for a while, and then starting my own business, and taking on the endeavor of writing my first book, and now being on my second book. I think that has helped me maintain that lifestyle of high tempo of what I was accustomed to. And I say this is probably the biggest challenge for me when I retired from the Marine Corps after 24 years, is that, going back to the beginning of this interview, Robert, is, I always had a lifestyle of high risk and living on the edge. And then I transitioned and spilled over into the Marine Corps with deployments and training and the type of lifestyle that I led, all of which was, acceptable by the standards of the Marine Corps and the military in general, because those are the types of people that they need to, do the things that we do in the military. So when I left the military after 24 years, I think it was really the absence of that friction, the absence of that high tempo lifestyle that really took the biggest adjustment for me, to understand that, I needed to find a way to continue that type of tempo to sustain me. So I think that's also very common for a lot of veterans. And I think it's especially common for those individuals that have experienced those high intensity moments that are only common to that type of combat.
So let me ask this. What happens when things slow down?
So the question was, what happens when things slow down?
Yeah. What happens when that tempo can't be kept up? What happens to Major Scott Huesing when your mind has time to catch up with your body?
Well, I think that for me personally, you just try and find, different outlets to really occupy your time. But I never allowed myself to do that. Again, I always found an outlet, whether it was physical fitness, whether it was work, whether it was transitioning into the private sector. I always was cognizant of the fact that I needed to do that. And there's plenty of guys out there that for some reason they hit those points in life where they're absent from their life and they struggle. And that's perfectly acceptable and understandable from what these young men and women have dealt with in the military, especially in combat, because one of the things I like to tell people is that it's acceptable to struggle. And, there's going to be points in life that are slippery, and that's life, Robert. That, life is slippery sometimes. And, there's times that, you'll lose traction along the way, and you kind of feel the ground slip out from underneath you, but that's all right. And those people in the military that have served and lived that type of lifestyle, I think sometimes feel that they're impervious to the effects of gravity and oftentimes land harder than others. But I want listeners to understand that it's all right to feel that, you're going to lose traction. It's all right for you to fall. But there's also this great network of people around you that are willing to support you, pick you back up, and understand that when you do fall and you get back up, to carry on with the mission. And that's the beauty of this military network that we have, not only when you're on active duty, but after you leave the service, is that if you're willing to reach out to it, if you're willing to connect with military support groups and organizations, the fraternity and the brotherhood and the sisterhood that you experience while on active duty is even bigger. And you probably understand this equally with the platform that you have doing podcasts and through writing and interacting with veterans, is that, you reach out and you understand that the support group and this network that I keep talking about is even bigger. And it's not, when I say a network, it's not like some 5 CD self-help set or, cult. It's just a bunch of great people that want to help each other out.
Yeah.
So that's really the power, again, of having served your country and leaving the military and understanding that it's a lifelong bond that you have with those you serve with and those that are willing to support, our nation's finest.
So there's more to you, right? You mentioned that you got out and you started a business, and I want to kind of briefly talk about what is it like to start your own business, the downs and the ups. Like, how did you move through the process of figuring that out for the individuals that are trying to look to be entrepreneurs?
Well, it's something that you have to make a conscious decision when you transition from the military. And I think that from my time as a young enlisted guy until 2013, when I retired from the Marine Corps, that the military overall has tremendous programs that enable the transition process from the military to the private sector. And the advice that I give those that are in the transition phase is find something that you love. Absolutely. And if you find something that you transition into and you don't love it, the beauty of it is that you're not under contract like in the military. You can leave. You can transition again.
Yeah.
So, look at that as an opportunity to continue to build your resume, but do what you love and don't be afraid to transition again. A lot of guys will get out of the military, especially having served a career. They do something for 20 years, they transition and they think, I'm going to do this for 20 years. And that's not the case. That's not my mindset when I went into it. And when I decided to make the decision to start my own business as a consultant and public speaker and writer, that was something I woke up every day and I said, I really love doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved writing the book. I love speaking to veterans groups. I love speaking to colleges and universities that want to hear my story and then want to hear about the lessons that I've learned, both good and bad throughout my life and throughout my career in the military, and learn from those examples. I think it's something that I'm really passionate about. I wake up every day, and when you work from home, you have to apply that same discipline, that same mindset that you did in the military, and have a regiment that you fall into every day. It's a blessing because, you can go to the gym or you can go to the Home Depot whenever you want, but you're also working all the time.
Yeah.
Your phone is never shut off and your family needs to understand that you're always working. I mean, case in point is I kind of had to scoot my family out of the house so I could do the interview with you, and they understand that. It's just it's a different type of lifestyle, but it gives you a lot of freedom. And if you do it right and you're disciplined about it, it's something that also gives you a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, I scooped my family out the house too. They went to the zoo. So there's, you didn't just write the book. You've dabbled in writing for things like leathernet.com, and I've seen other posts that you've put on like LinkedIn. One that stand out to me, veteran warriors have much to teach us. And, speaking with you today, as a veteran warrior yourself, I mean, that's almost obvious. It's, the mindset of learn from your elders. But what made you write it? What did you learn from your veteran elders?
That article was written when I was with Second Fast Company, and I had been escorting some senior level officers around down in Norfolk at the headquarters. And I decided to go into the club, have lunch, and they were commissioning the USS Iwo Jima that year. And as I looked around, I saw some older veterans, all with their red baseball caps on, and some blue that had the battle colors and said World War II. And there was one gentleman, his name was Jim Skinner. He was a private first class in the Marine Corps. He fought in 5 different campaigns: the Solomon Islands, Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, Okinawa, to name a few. And I boldly went up and asked him if I could join him for lunch. And I sat down with PFC Skinner, and it was interesting because as much as I wanted to learn about his experiences in World War II, I was hard pressed to keep him at the time, 89, from turning the tables on me and asking me about Iraq and my deployments in the Middle East, because he was so fascinated with it that he continued to ask me about that. So that was what spurred that article, was looking around at this room full of World War II veterans eating lunch by themselves at the commissioning of the USS Iwo Jima. It was interesting to me because they didn't all know each other. They were just the few surviving veterans that had fought in support of the island hopping campaign in the Pacific, and they were all brought together for this commissioning, but they didn't really know each other. And what struck me was the active duty service members that were in the club weren't sitting with these individuals, asking them their questions and really capitalizing on that opportunity. Is like, man, I was just one of those guys. I never had the ability not to ask questions. I've always been kind of a nosy body and wanted to learn from those that have gone before me. And it's a unique segment of our military culture and of America that, you know, these veterans, especially our World War II veterans, their numbers are decreasing at a rapid rate. And I say that not only for World War II, but Korea and our Vietnam veterans. They have a wealth of experience to share with us.
Yeah. My wife's grandmother, before she passed, was, I think, like 98. And her sister was the last surviving Nurse Corps member, and she got to throw out the first pitch at Dodger Stadium like 4 years ago, Aunt B, and she just passed. But I got to speak with her, you know, at birthday dinners, and for being an old lady, she had a sharp mind. And she's like, I get out of the house, the VA comes to pick me up, and, you know, we go do, you know, speaking engagements, and you just got to keep your mind sharp. And so, like, we got to talk about a lot of, you know, the times while she was in, and, you know, what she did in World War II, and how they used to wear like full length bathing suits. Like, I mean, you know, just getting a little piece of the history.
It's really fast.
Yeah. You know, and you're right. That's what I think my generation of veterans, or even just my generation in general, what they don't understand is that, you know, that's living history outside of the history books. And it's
well put. Yeah. Living history. Absolutely.
So there's a part of your life that I don't see much of, and I wanted to tap into it, and that's Save the Brave, your nonprofit. What is Save the Brave?
Yeah, that's thanks for asking, because it is a big part of what I do. Save the Brave is a certified nonprofit organization that helps connect veterans through outreach programs and that are specifically dealing with the effects of post-traumatic stress. And it was founded several years ago by one of my young Marines that I served with in Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, Nick Velez. He's the president, and Ernie Delgado is the co-founder. He's a Vietnam vet. And so shortly after they started Save the Brave, Nick called me up, and he's a successful entrepreneur and business owner now, and asked me if I would be the executive director to help bring some guidance and leadership to what we do. And it's been my extreme pleasure to, not only help the organization, but allow me to expand my network and connect with veterans. And we host several outreach programs a year. One of the most successful ones we do is a Channel Island fishing trip with a program called Stoked on Fishing, which is hosted by Fox West Sports, and Andrew Pereira and Shay McAtee, the host. They bring veterans out, and we take them out, and through our donors and fundraisers, we're allowed to get veterans together and help them connect, because we've really found that there's no pill, there's no magic vaccine or program that's really any better at helping vets heal that are dealing with PTS than connecting, talking, and sharing their experiences and stories with people that have been through the same type of events that they've experienced.
Yeah.
So Save the Brave has just been a real another great opportunity for me to stay connected with veterans and to really help our veteran community. And we've helped hundreds of veterans. It allows us to stay very connected with our Gold Star network and family members. We bring them out on events, and we went to the 242nd Marine Corps birthday ball and invited some Gold Star members up with us, and to Las Vegas this year. And it's just an amazing opportunity for me to be able to continue to serve and help out veterans. That, again, at the beginning and end of the day, Robert, that's what makes me happy is helping veterans stay connected and being able to tell their story and my story. And it's just really what I'm passionate about.
Can I get a sneak peek into the second book?
We're still working on that. I'm not going to share any details with that just yet because I'm still in the research phase. But I will say it's another great story about our nation's military and some of the bravery that they exhibited on the battlefield.
Cool. So there's just some kind of generic questions I asked to wrap up with everybody. And being that this is a podcast that's geared more towards transitioning veterans, one thing that I want to ask you is, what would you tell vets that are struggling to find themselves today?
Well, if there's veterans that are listening to the podcast, Robert, that are struggling to find themselves, my advice is to reach out, is to stay connected to those that you've served with. Reach out to those organizations that can enable your success. And I understand that there's veterans that transition, and that transition is harder for some, especially for younger men and women in the military, because they don't have necessarily what I had is, all the life experience, and you develop this massive network of friends and professional colleagues over a 24-year career. So I understand that it's challenging and can be really daunting for some people when they leave the military. And if they're struggling to find themselves, is really reach out and stay connected. That's the best advice I can give to them, because I really subscribe to what we've spoken about during the entire interview, is the power of this network of military supporters, not only veterans, but people that have never served in the military. They're so willing to help out. And it's not just a bumper sticker, support our troops. There's really a lot of people out there that are putting some skin in the game, reaching out and helping hire veterans to afford them opportunities to further their career or whatever they're passionate about. There's an amazing network out there. And if there's people that want to volunteer and get involved, absolutely they can. We're always looking for supporters with Save the Brave, but there's a ton of other great 501s and nonprofit organizations that help veterans. So just stay tied to your roots, and if that's your comfort zone, and really stay connected to that.
Great. That's pretty much on point. I think everybody who comes on here talks about the power of the network, and not the network like you were saying, where it's, pay for this conference and, come hang out. It's that deep network that we've established from either 4 or 24 years. So, that's great advice. Yeah. All the support that I've received personally, no one's ever asked a dime from me.
Yeah. And everything that we do, whether it's outreach or whether it's through Save the Brave, none of us at Save the Brave take a single dime. All of the proceeds and donations go back to help veterans directly. And that is something unique about our charity, is that none of us on the board, and there's no employees that take a single penny. We do it all on a strictly volunteer basis to help veterans. That's what's most important to us. And that is a great message that I think should be in every program that you do, is the power of that network.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize it enough.
Yeah. So if you could tell recruit Huesing one thing to prep for today, what would that be?
That guy, I remember him. He was a surly young recruit. What would I tell recruit Huesing is, stay vigilant and, stay focused. Because if you apply yourself and you stay on the right track, great things will come.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, because you know what? One of my favorite things you said this whole conversation was that treat every challenge in life as a mission, and that you learn, make sure that you learn from each mission, each challenge. That's super important. The last thing I kind of want to ask is, what's your end goal, and what legacy would you like to leave behind?
My end goal and legacy, well, I think that being able to share this one important story in Echo and Ramadi is a small part of Marine Corps history. And there's been important battles throughout history. Yeah. And I think that my legacy, whether it's just this one book, Echo and Ramadi, that tells a small fraction of what our service members and Marines have sacrificed, is something that I'm proud of, to be able to share their story. Obviously, my family and my friends and all the people I've served with that I've made an impression on and that have come into my life to help me achieve the success I have is really the metric of success in which I measure everything I've done. It's really been, the end result has been this, again, the network of friends and family and supporters that have come into my life. But I've also taken some challenges along the way and risks, and opened myself up to that, to enjoy that type of connection. And it's really, I think if there was an end game, I think it's a perpetual connection to stay involved with our veteran community, and to make sure that we always remember that it's not just about that individual Marine. And that's what people need to understand, is that it's not necessarily a glamorous life that is portrayed in the media or on television and movies, is that these are real sacrifices, and they do so willingly and they do so unreservedly, that I never want people to take that for granted. Yeah. I think if there was a final thought that I would have, is that that type of sacrifice, not only from our Marines and soldiers and service members, but the families that endure the separation, and our Gold Star families that endure the loss when we lose a Marine or soldier on the battlefield, that they never should be forgotten. And we should be telling those great stories about their sacrifice and their spirit and the support that they continue to give every single day, Robert. I wish our mainstream media was just rife with stories about that, instead of some of the ridiculous antics of elected officials and celebrity gossip that just overwhelms our television sets and radios at times. I think there's so many vital stories that need to be told.
Well, Major, I can't express the gratitude I have right now enough. And, I mentioned it earlier that I feel that if anybody was supposed to be out there, it was you. And, maybe that's because of the fact that you are so able to articulate the story and give the heroes their moment. And not take it for yourself, right? Because you could have easily written this book about you. And it's an honor to be able to speak with somebody who's so selfless in so many ways. And I'm looking forward to February 20th when the book drops. And I'll be carrying it in my backseat for when I run into you, because this is a small community.
It is a small community. And hey, Robert, it's, again, thanks for your service and for having me on the program. And again, if the listeners are interested in learning more about me or the book, it's available now for pre-order on Amazon. You can Google Scott Huesing or Amazon Echo and Ramadi and order your copy now. And then again, it will be on bookshelves everywhere at Barnes & Noble and Costco on February 20th, and I'll be out running roughshod signing copies for everyone that asks. I mean, it's absolutely my pleasure to be on the program and to be able to share my story. If there's listeners that are interested in supporting or donating to Save the Brave, they can go to www.savethebrave.org. And if they want to learn a little bit more about me or see some pictures about the book and some videos, they can visit my website at www.echoinramadi.com. And I look forward to meeting you real soon. And thanks again for having me on the program, Robert. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure's mine. And Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too, and to all your listeners.
All right.
Number 5, brother.
Hurrah. So if you've made it this far, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of You're the Vet. It's been a real pleasure. Really, if you have it in you, I recommend going to find this book, pre-order it on Amazon, go out and search for a signing date or where he'll be at, and just reach out. Keep in mind to just reach out to one another and keep in touch with one another, because you never know where your relationships are going to go and who's still keeping you in mind. So with that being said, till next time, you're the vet.